Hello, today we shall make another video. This video shall be about Stoicism. For those who don't know what it is, it's a fairly basic concept where Stoics, or those who follow Stoicism, are people who behave in such a way that they act without feelings or complaint. To translate, Stoics do things without emotional attachment. So, for example, if you are told to do something, if you are a Stoic, you either say no because you do not believe it's practical, or when you act upon it, you do not hold any emotions for or against it. Stoics are, in essence, people who do not show emotions that much. Now, there is problems with complete Stoicism, I will not deny that. Lacking any outlet for emotion can lead to severe mental problems. However, Stoicism to some extent will always be required for all humans. See, emotion is, shall we say, a double-edged sword. It is useful to get out, especially because we naturally have it, but at the same time, it can cause a lot of issues if that emotion is misplaced or over-exaggerated, shall we say. Even joy and happiness, they can be a real problem if overemphasized or you have them to a ridiculous excess. As an example, a person who is really happy about marriage can often overlook several things. For example, the person who's proposing to them's qualities, or even the practicality of what they plan given the situation. There are restraints to things, so sometimes people can go overboard due to extreme emotions, especially those like happiness or anger. Even sadness is among those that can really get one to act in a way that is not the best. As a result, when it comes down to it, Stoicism, or the ability to do things without displaying feelings or complaint, becomes very important, because some things just need to be done and other times emotions need to be reined in. Those are the times when Stoicism really shines. For example, you may not like to do the chores, but you gotta do them eventually, so it's best not to have a pity party. Just get it over with, you're good, you're done. Simultaneously, when you feel a lot of sadness, sometimes it's best to basically clam it up a bit, restrain yourself, and continue on with life. It may not be the most healthy option, but it allows for you to move on with your life, and you can slowly but surely release the sadness you have over time, thus distributing it and not feeling like a freaking wave is crashing over you. It can also be really good for getting things done, because, let's face it, we all have things to do in our lives. Mourning is important, especially for really, really bad situations, but at the same time, things have to get done. I hate to break it to you, but eating does not wait for you. You either do it or you die. No in between, really. As a result, people have to keep moving. Stoicism allows for this. Stoicism overcomes large emotions, or more accurately, excessive emotions. There you go. That seems like a better way to phrase it, but back to the whole thing. It is just a reality that Stoicism is, to some extent, a requirement in life. You cannot cry over stubbing your toe while still maintaining productivity or just normal function. Eventually, you have to harden yourself and say, okay, that stings, but I still have things to do. There will always be times when you can express yourself. In fact, it is perfectly fine to do so in many situations. But you must be able to, if the moment requires it, shutting up your emotions, focusing on the task at hand, and getting things done. It may not be the most nice way to look at things, but it's just what has to be done sometimes. Bad situations do not wait to be solved. You don't have the time to throw a pity party when things are going to heck. Sometimes you just need to shut it, work to get it solved, and then have a bit of catharsis at the end where you release all those pent-up emotions. Again, I'm not advocating, and I don't think anyone should ever advocate for complete suppression of emotions, but sometimes you need to harden like a rock and take the waves as they come. Sure, you can let yourself go on occasion, show emotion, especially excessive emotion, but it must be restrained and done in a limited environment in terms of what it can damage or reduce in terms of effectiveness. For example, it's not exactly a good idea in an office setting to just start crying your eyes out. Now, can you cry your eyes out at home when you're not doing anything and there's no real harm in it? Sure, you can. Not going to suggest it, but you could. Meanwhile, in the office, you still have to get things done because that's a job you agreed to. The fact is, in certain situations, you have to be stoic. And that can be in your behavior as well. Just smile is a legitimate advice in certain situations. Because people tend to associate things with other people. For example, if you see someone crying, our empathy tends to result in us wanting to cry as well or feeling sad in some way. We don't like seeing other people feeling certain emotions, especially if we care for them. For example, if your friend is upset about something, usually you're not too happy about that. If your enemy is upset, usually you're laughing. Well, usually is a bit debatable there. It depends on the person and how much you hate the person you're dealing with, but still. Far less in terms of sympathy or empathy for enemies, just generally speaking as humans. However, sometimes people worry. This is especially true with friends, and so if you don't want them to worry, the best way is, and this may sound cold saying it, literally just smile and shut up about your emotions. Because if you look like you're happy, or at least that this is tolerable, and you look like you're handling things fine, people will worry less, and that can be very beneficial, especially if it's a short-term suffering type of situation. For example, you may have stubbed your toe while working. Well, sure, it's not the best thing to happen, but you can have this interrupting everyone else's work, and they will likely have some reaction if you revealed your true anger at the whole situation. So, smile, go down, start working, and once it's done, then you can swear all you want about the freaking door that you hit with your foot. I don't even need to speak from experience here. I've stubbed my toe enough times to safely say, yeah, it's not a fun time. Legitimately, I don't like it. But sometimes you must ignore the pain and go through. The fact is, life just happens sometimes. You won't always have a good roll with the dice. Because life does not care about you, about me, about anyone else. It just is. Nature does not give a single iota of a care about any of us. It just exists. You're not actively competing with it, you're not actively competing against it. And so, coming with that is the simple fact of, well, if life is just going to be life, we gotta deal with it whatever way we can. Sometimes that means letting our emotions out and having some catharsis. Other times it means bottling them up, trucking them off a bridge, and pretending they don't exist. It all depends on the situation and what it entails. For example, someone crying in a war zone isn't exactly going to get much done. In fact, they're likely to get shot. Simultaneously, someone who constantly bottles up their emotions at home is going to be an emotional freaking wreck. Which isn't good, supposedly. I have a feeling that isn't good, and I'm not certain, but I figure basically having your internal feelings breaking themselves against your body would not be a good thing, so I think it's safe to say not good. Anyways, back to the point. You need to sometimes put up a front. You also need an outlet. To balance the natural result of Stoicism, you must have some way to be emotional, some way to release that pent-up feeling. And which side you have a harder time setting up depends on you as a person. There are several people who are very emotional. They have plenty of outlets and ways to confide in other people, but they don't really have a way to hide their emotions. They don't have a front they can put up and say, everything's fine, let's keep going, let's focus. Simultaneously, there are those who can put up fronts for days, but they don't really have a good outlet. These are the people you usually see where they are depressed, but you don't notice because they usually put up a cheery front. Stuff like that. Both exist, but at the same time, both need the other. You need the front, you need the outlet. So those who struggle with one and have ease with the other, those who struggle with the reverse, or those who struggle with both, all need to find ways to eventually reach a point where they have both. Now, it's not good to say you need a front sometimes. You need a little persona to put on so that people don't worry about you. But it is true. Everyone worrying about you is not a good thing, nor is it very healthy. Because if everyone's staring at you, they're not thinking about themselves or other people around you. Which means problems that another person has can be overlooked in favor of you because you're the one who's making the biggest noise. And sometimes those people need that attention. Simultaneously, sometimes you need that attention. You have to weigh the balance. But if you need attention, you often have a better chance if you just approach someone and talk to them about it. Confide in someone you trust. Will everyone do this? No, that's why you sometimes need to put up a front and allow others to observe and realize, oh, that person has a problem, because we still need to get that problem solved. Even if a person's not the best at confiding in others and explaining, hey, I have this problem, you still need to find that problem and help them out at some point. And Stoicism becomes a very good way of basically allowing yourself to blend in when it's necessary. There's a very good value in standing out when necessary, but blending in is equally as important. We are, after all, tribal animals. We exist in groups, even as individuals. So sometimes suppression becomes a necessity. Blending in, essentially. If everyone is stoic and hides their cards well, you can maintain some level of social order without much effort and uniformity, which means those that do stand out are usually those who get investigated by others and thus can either get help, or if they're actively harming people, they can get stopped. In essence, there's value in blending in, and there's value in standing out. When to do which depends on your situation. For example, if you're really struggling with something, sometimes it's good, and by sometimes, I mean a lot of the time, it's good to make that clear so that others can react accordingly. For example, if you have PTSD, it's not good to hide that nonsense, because that can go really badly for everyone else around you. Especially because PTSD can trigger aggression in people, and being in the blast radius of that would not be a good thing. Now, PTSD is not a problem inherently in terms of, oh, that's a bad thing to have. It's more just unfortunate. Life is life, but it carries no inherent evil with it that the person is. It's just an unfortunate thing people have, is what I'm trying to say, rather than it indicates evil. And you need to be aware of that, because that unfortunate thing can lead to very bad consequences depending on the situation. We have enough stories of veterans committing suicide to know that for certain. Simultaneously, sometimes you're a bit annoyed, but otherwise things are going fine, so you don't need to be public with your minor grievances. Sure, maybe vent to your friends when you have a chat with them, but you don't need to be very expressive about your dislikes. Snyder Marks, at best, it's not really that big of a deal most of the time. And so putting up a calm front can be very useful in that situation, because no one's going to look at you as a whiny and petty piece of trash. Seriously, petty people are not people to emulate. I mean, respect the commitment sometimes, but legitimately, there are better things to put your time to than being petty. So just letting things exist without demonstrating a level of anger is very good. You need to balance the scales on several occasions. Sometimes you need to go all in on emotionalism or all in on stoicism. Again, using the battlefield as an example because, I like talking about war. I'm used to it, at least in terms of understanding that it is a very, very tense situation. You need to be very stoic on the battlefield. You do not have the time to mourn a lot of the time, and you have to get the job done or you die. There is no time to be stuck in the mud. So you have to put on the front of, okay, things are fine, I can handle this, so you can actually get through things and handle them. You have to. Otherwise, you end up dead in a trench. Does that help anyone? Nah. Would it be better if you're still alive? Yeah, so don't make it easier to die. It's that simple. But it also requires a lot of stoicism, and that is admittedly a problem with a lot of veterans, is they have a hard time turning that off once they get home. Simultaneously, when you are in a very big problem, or have a very poor situation, it is sometimes very good to be emotional, because it makes it very clear that people should be paying attention. If someone's whining very loudly about a situation and you look and you're like, oh, freak, that is something that needs to be solved immediately, you're more likely to, solve it rather than someone saying, hey, we got a minor issue over here. Most people aren't going to pay it any mind. Emotion is very good at bringing attention to something really good or really bad, and so having very emotional episodes is sometimes good. But, of course, when everything is treated like that, it's like the boy who cried wolf. At a certain point, it means less. Oh no, this is really bad, says the drama queen who makes everything very emotionally charged. Yeah, no one's gonna care in such a situation. You need to balance the situations and how you portray, not betray, portray your emotions and the situation at hand. Stoicism is very valuable and something we really need to remember as a society. I'm seeing a lot more emotion in people, and I can understand why. Let's face it, these are not exactly the most orderly of times, but at the same time, we must maintain some level of stoicism and discipline. We need that front because not everyone has time for you. Some people may be able to allocate some time to you, but we're not the most important people in the world, and so we need to let others get that attention because some people really freaking need it. I'm sorry, but a veteran who has PTSD needs more attention than a teenager who's having some minor issues on their math exam. It's just a fact, because I'd prefer for more people to live, and yeah, the veteran suicide rate kind of makes it clear which side needs more attention in such a situation. We need to be able to put up a front. We all do. When someone says, just smile, sure, it can be freaking backhanded and utterly asinine, but sometimes it's legitimately good advice. When things are bad, sometimes just smile. Take your beatings as they are, keep going through, and eventually you'll reach the other side and you realize, hold up, that was a whole lot easier if I just pushed through it. And that's the thing. Sometimes it is legitimately easier, and by sometimes I mean a lot of times, to get through things by being stoic, and other times, and these are the times where you need a lot of other people to pay attention, it is easier to get a result by being emotional. And that is very important. It's like flagging. Stoicism indicates, okay, things aren't that bad. We can keep going, keep a calm head, and get through this. Emotion is, hey, we need something right now. We need to fix this or that. And so you must balance when the flags are used. You have to, in some sense, repress your emotions when things aren't too serious, because otherwise, you end up sending signals that are unnecessary and can easily distract attention from important things. To add to this, let's talk about comedy real quick. This is an aside, but it's important to note in regards to these flags. Comedy can be very useful for alleviating tension, because having too much stress while doing something can be a very real problem. In one way, this is actually one of the few times where being emotional can actually benefit times when it's good to be stoic, because If you're stoic all the time doing something, that isn't exactly a known healthy thing, because you're basically always on edge. So comedy basically taking the edge off and letting you release some emotion can be quite good, especially in a very dire situation. It's like a pressure valve. Pressure builds up over time due to stoicism. Your emotions are basically being sealed away during such a period. Comedy is a good way to let it out, let it fade a bit, and then you can go back to focusing on what's important. And thus, it's a very good way to essentially balance out the cons of stoicism while simultaneously still allowing you to focus on what's at hand and what is important. Simultaneously, comedy is also a very good way to basically force people to think a bit more cautiously about situations that are happy. Essentially can encourage stoicism, though it's much rarer. For example, talking about like, yeah, of course this is gonna go on forever, is a very good way to poke fun at people who are hyper excited at a specific situation. That is good. It allows for one to prepare for the fact that eventually the good times will end and we need to start preparing for the next. This is most commonly seen with sarcasm. Comedy is a good way to essentially mediate between these two. It can be more lighthearted, like, say, gallows humor during a bad situation, or more dark and just kind of negative, like sarcasm or sass. But it's best used to balance. I won't say has to, because things depend, but generally speaking, that is the case. Anyways, have a good day. Hope you enjoyed the video, and see you later.